Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Spider-Verse Retrospectives, and today we're going to be continuing our discussion on the second Edge of Spider-Verse miniseries as we take a look at Edge of Spider-Verse Volume 2, Number 3. And we got 3 tales of Spideys to look at today, so let's get started. The first one, well, actually focuses on Pavitra Prabhakar, aka Spider-Man India, and his story is not really a story per se, but it is an interesting little collection. Basically, his story, quote-unquote, basically consists of Spider-Man India as he's jumping from universe to universe, duking it out with the supervillains from those respective universes. Like, he dukes it out with a giant ape version of the Kingpin, a monstrous Rhino, a multi-armed Venom, a much more powerful sorcerer, Doctor Doom, just basically him doing all his spider thing across all these various universes. The real meat of the story is more on just seeing these fight scenes play out by a wide variety of artists. Because, yeah, every single universe that he visits only takes up like one page, and it's just a still image of him, duking it out with the villain, and again, each world is in a different style. So it's just basically meant to showcase the different artists as they interpret this. However, the actual context of the story is that Pavitra is just kind of reflecting on his own story. Basically, he's talking about his relation to the other Spideys in the multiverse, how he's worked alongside them, how he respects them, he considers them friends, he thinks they're cool and all that, and he likes doing all that. But ultimately, when it comes down to him and his world, he's his world's Spider-Man. And while everyone will technically call him Spider-Man India because, well, that's how they differentiate him, he's like, that feels just kind of a little over, that kind of feels like an over, that kind of feels like it's not, it doesn't exactly sound right, and he's not calling them racist, don't get me wrong, no. He's just saying, he kind of compare it, it's like if Indian people called Indian food. To them, it's just food. He's not Spider-Man India, he's just Spider-Man. He's not Indian food, he's just food. It's just like, basically, it doesn't matter, what nickname they give him, he's just Spider-Man. He has just as right to be Spider-Man as anyone else. And so, basically, the whole story is him just, kicking ass in these worlds and just kind of reflecting on his life and the ups and downs of it. How he's a reluctant teenage superhero who kind of got thrown into everything. How like most Spideys, he lives by the mantra that with great power there must also come great responsibility, which is what his Uncle Bim taught him. He reflects on how his Aunt Maya likes to help by giving back to the community, which he respects, but he can't do as much because, Spider-Man, he's got to do his whole thwip duties. But at the end of the day, when his story ends, we see him return back to his universe as he says, well, why do I do what I do? Well, simple, because if I don't do it, who will? And it's actually really nice. And again, it kind of reflects on something that I do like when it comes to the whole multiverse of infinite possibilities. Yeah, there are an infinite number of Spideys, but they each have their own worlds to guard, and to each of these worlds, they're the only Spider-Man, and they're needed. So, again, nice stuff, and I like it. But anyway, with that out of the way, the second story is definitely a lot more of a traditional kind of story, as this one actually showcases a world that's where Felicia Hardy becomes this world's resident Spider-Person. How? Well, it all starts with the ball at the fictional embassy of... hold on, I want to make sure I get the name right. The embassy of the Delvadian Embassy. And what's going on is that the Delvadian Embassy is displaying one of their rare treasures from their country, namely this ancient spider idol, which is gold encrusted with jewels, and just, it's basically got put simply, it's like it's got "Steal Me" written all over it. And so as this thing is being toured in New York, the Prince of Delvadia is basically just, the Prince of Delvadia has hired the NYPD to set up an elite security system to try and keep this priceless treasure under wraps. However, one of the officers assigned to this one, Officer Jean DeWolf, has kind of brought one of her friends to the ball. In this case, Felicia Hardy, who is dancing with the prince, who is more than happy to give Felicia his attention, though even he realizes that she might be playing him a little, as he can tell that she's leading the dance, so to speak. But ultimately, as they're done dancing, Felicia does lead the prince over to Jean DeWolf, so they can, iron out the details of the security. And so Felicia leaves the pair alone so they can, do their thing. Unfortunately, though, the prince was not wrong. It turns out that Felicia did kind of plant a few bugs on him. It turns out that she slipped the listening device onto his collar so that she could listen in on the conversation, and she overhears what's going to happen. That basically, once the whole party's over and everyone vacates the embassy, they're going to secure secure the spider idol in a room filled with infrared lasers and put inside a case that only the prince himself can open with a fingerprint. Well, it's a good thing that Felicia Hardy wore fabric that was sensitive to fingerprints, because now she's got a sample of his finger on one of her on that piece of fabric. And thus when the party is over and everyone leaves, Felicia returns by slithering in through the air vents, well, metaphorically speaking, and she's got infrared goggles, so she's able to see the infrared lasers rather easily. And while Felicia does kind of say she feels a little guilty for playing her friend like that, since, Jean's a cop and she invited her to this thing, she still has no moral qualms about doing this, and so after she manages to get through all the lasers, she gets up to the case of the spider idol, and using the sample of the prince's fingerprint, she opens up the case and decides to make a grab for it. Unfortunately, as she reaches for the head of the spider idol, its pincers bite her finger, which freaks her out a little and causes her to fall back and accidentally trip one of the lasers. However, for whatever reason, that doesn't seem like Felicia's biggest concern, as after being bit by the idol, she's a little confused. One, that an idol bit her at all, and two, why her head feels funny. However, thankfully, the sound of sirens going off does alert her she needs to get out of there ASAP, and so she manages to grab the spider idol and get out of there just before the police arrive. Of course, the police wonder how the hell a burglar got in under their watch, so Jean DeWolf tells everyone to kind of set up a perimeter because the thief couldn't have gotten far. Meanwhile, outside the embassy, Felicia is wondering what the hell is going on, as she has no idea how she was able to get out of there so easily, and she knows it has something to do with the spider idol. It's clear that this thing has done something to her, though she starts to realize what it is as she quickly notices something about her surroundings. All the buildings are upside down. Yeah, she's standing on the underside of a ledge and quickly realizes, yep, she's got spider powers now. As such, eventually her theft of the Delvadian spider idol does make news, and Jean DeWolf begins calling her the Spider Thief because, spider idol. Of course, Felicia thinks that name sounds stupid. She's got to work on that. But hey, she's got spider powers now, which might be able to be they might be helpful in future heists, but if she has spider powers, then she needs to be able to do them properly, or utilize the gimmick properly. And so as she's watching the news, we see her putting together a costume, as Jean DeWolf talks about how Wilson Fisk is worried that the spider thief will steal one of his priceless treasures, this ancient clay tablet or whatever. Eventually Felicia thinks it's a challenge, as the police say that they have this thing under lock and key and it will take a master thief to get to it, and so Felicia turns off the TV and goes out into night in her new costume, calling herself the Night Spider, which, let me see if I can find her costume here. Actually, yeah, I found it right away. Yep, this is the Night Spider, and honestly, I dig the costume. It's a nice mix of the Spider-Man motif of Spider-Man's usual motif, while still mixing in Felicia's traditional black cat motif. It's a nice little median of the styles, and I dig it. But yeah, from there, Felicia begins using her newfound spider powers to just commit these egregious heists rather easily. She breaks into the Kingpin's penthouse and manages to get past pressure plates thanks to her spider sense. She manages to rip open the safe as if it were wallpaper, and she can actually use her webs to break into windows, as the webbing provides a good cover from the sound of breaking glass. So yeah, she just starts using her powers to just steal things one by one, leaving notes in her wake that say this was stolen by your friendly neighborhood Night Spider. Maybe not in those words, but point is, she's making a fool of the police, and Jean DeWolf is sadly getting caught in the crossfire, as her boss is not happy that the Night Spider keeps making them look like idiots. As one by one, Felicia continues stealing all these artifacts, leaving things behind, and the only traces she leaves is that the thief has spider powers. So Jean's kind of getting near the end of her rope. However, Jean eventually does catch a break, as one night while at a bar, Felicia gives her a call and tells her that she has something that she needs to tell her about. And so while Jean is kind of little out of it because of all the crap she's been under, she at the very least decides to hear her friend out as she goes to Felicia's penthouse. And sure enough, once she arrives, she sees the spider idol on Felicia's mantle and draws her weapon. And when she goes into the other room, she sees Felicia in her night spider costume without her mask as she's sitting in the middle of all of her stolen loot. As such, Jean wants to know what the hell is going on, and Felicia does admit to her, yeah, she's the night spider and she wants to turn herself in. Not out of a sense of guilt, mind you, but it's because this whole thing is too easy. Basically, part of the reason why Felicia became a thief was because there was a thrill in it. There was a risk of being caught. There was always a chance that she could lose. But with her spider powers, it's like this whole thief thing was put on easy mode. And as a result, the fun's just kind of worn off, and so she doesn't really see the point of doing this anymore. As such, she figures she can at least try and make her friend happy by turning herself in, and hey, maybe she can get a thrill out of breaking out of prison, whatever. As such, while Jean finds this whole thing weird, she at the very least is still a good cop and realizes that, well, she still needs to arrest Felicia despite the fact that they're friends. However, as she puts handcuffs on Felicia, well, that's when a portal opens up right there in Felicia's penthouse. And from the portal comes Aranya, who tells Felicia that they need her help for a hopeless cause for a hopeless cause of the Spider-Verse is in danger, yada yada yada. Point is, Aranya is here to recruit Night Spider. And the instant that Felicia hears that it's a hopeless cause and that they may lose, well, the thrill immediately comes back as she breaks right out of her handcuffs and tells Jean that they're not her size, and she'll bring her back something nice before jumping into the portal after Aranya, leaving Jean alone in her penthouse with all the stolen loot, as Jean wonders how the hell she's gonna write any of this up. So, yeah, that's where that story ends. But the final story is actually of a Spidey that we have that did exist prior to Edge of Spider-Verse, namely. Let me tell you the story of Sakura Spider. And yeah, the name sounds kind of Japanese. It's because it is. Sakura Spider actually made her debut in a manga, specifically in the manga Deadpool Samurai. For those who haven't read Deadpool Samurai, allow me to give the basic premise. Basically, the Avengers have hired Deadpool and set him up in Japan to be the leader of a samurai division of the Avengers. While Deadpool's teammates are small, he does take up Deadpool does happily take up the mantle, and yeah, there aren't a lot of people in Japan, there aren't a lot of superheroes in Japan, but one of the heroes that Deadpool ends up recruiting to his little samurai squad Avengers is, well, Sakura Spider, basically Japan's resident Spidey, who like the main universe Spider-Man, just kind of does her own thing, and despite the fact that she's a spider person, she kind of acts as the straight man for Deadpool's antics. However, this story kind of gets more into her deal, which, as for one thing, the story is in color, as a manga is typically in black and white, so we can actually see what her costume looks like in color, which, let me see if I can find Sakura Spider's costume. It's actually pretty good. Yeah, this is the Sakura Spider costume, and I think it looks really cool in color. I like the light shades of pink mixed in with the webbing while still looking mostly white. So overall it's nice. But ultimately, the comic itself mostly acts as a way of showcasing her backstory. As in Deadpool Samurai, all we really knew is that she was meant to be the stand-in spider person. But in this story, we actually learn what her backstory is, as while she's out doing her thing as Sakura Spider, she basically starts thinking about her history, and put simply, we learn that her real name is actually Haruka, which might have been revealed in Deadpool Samurai, but I might have forgot. My point is this: Haruka, like most other Spideys in the multiverse, was your typical average teenager until the day that she and her parents went to a natural history museum, and, well, radioactive spider bite, spider powers, you get the gist. However, in this reality, rather than her Uncle Ben dying and imparting upon her the whole great power, great responsibility mantra, it was her father. As it turns out, Hydra became aware of Haruka and her extra-normal abilities, and they wanted her. As such, Haruka's father tried defending her when a Hydra agent came for them, and sadly he got a bullet and a knife for his troubles. Thankfully, he was able to keep the Hydra agent distracted long enough for Haruka and her mother to run away, but yeah, Haruka saw her dad die in front of her face, and so when she and her mother got to safety, she kind of broke down and thought that, and kind of realized that despite all of her powers, she just sat back and did nothing. And so, of course, like most Spidey, she blames herself for what happened to her father, though her mother assures her that it's fine, that he was just doing his responsibility as a father to protect her. And of course, that results in Haruka thinking back on a conversation she and her dad had once about how he used to say the mantra that with great power there must also come great responsibility. And while at the time Haruka didn't understand it, now after seeing her father essentially live that responsibility of protecting his daughter, she decides that she wants to live by that mantra as well. And so that's what resulted in her developing the Sakura Spider, the Sakura Spider persona, got it right, and just kicking ass, saving lives, and just being a generally good superhero. Which she imparts onto a random citizen that she saves as they ask why she does this, and she talks about how her hero told her that with great power there must also come great responsibility. And so, let me just actually see if I can find a good example of this. Yeah. It's because her hero once told that with great power there must also come great responsibility. However, as the crowd of people are going around her, that's when everything ties back into End of the Spider-Verse, as on a nearby ledge, Madam Web is watching Sakura Spider, and so Haruka's spider sense alerts her to Madam Web's presence, and of course Madam Web lets Haruka know that the heroes of the Spider-Verse kind of need her help. So there you go. Anyway, so yeah. What are my thoughts on these stories? Again, let's first talk, of course, let's get to the Spider-Man India story. And that one I think is fine. Again, it's mostly there to just kind of be a character piece for Pavitr Prabhakar. As, like I said, the whole gist of his tale is just him jumping from universe to universe and kind of thinking back on his, place as Spider-Man India. His whole thing in relation to all the other Spideys of the multiverse, and talking about how they sometimes call him Spider-Man India, and ultimately, while he is aware that in the infinite multiverse there are a bunch of other Spideys that are protecting their own worlds, his world only has him, and in that world, he's Spider-Man. He's not Spider-Man India, he's just Spider-Man. And when it comes down to it, if he doesn't do his job, then who will? And I kind of like that. I like that we see him kind of thinking over his life, the tragedies that it took for him to get to the point he is, and that yes, he does enjoy the whole multiverse jumping thing, but at the end of the day, he's still Spider-Man, and they're still Spider-Man, and he still has responsibilities. And I like that. It's just, again, short, sweet, and to the point, and ultimately, it's just a nice little character piece to kind of go into more of his, inner monologue and kind of see how he operates, which, again, little things throughout that one do kind of help affirm to us that he's still Spider-Man. As while he's thinking this all over, his mind even wanders, as when he makes the comparison of everyone calling him Spider-Man India to Indians calling Indian food, he's like, it's not Indian food, we just call it food. Now I'm hungry. Glad I grabbed a snack. Again, it's just little things like that that are nice. And what makes it even better, of course, is the different art styles with every universe that Pavitr visits as he jumps from one world to the next, kicking ass. They're all very unique and different. Which, let me see if I can find examples of it. Yeah. Like here, I like the different variety of art that we see throughout his story, as all of them are very unique and very moody, capturing the style of whatever world he's in, while also giving some really good detail on the villains he's fighting. Just look at the Rhino here. That looks fucking monstrous. And I love the design they gave to Venom here. That, you can't deny, that looks really cool. And as a result, I think his story, again, while not really technically a story, is a good character piece that's basically emboldened with a lot of great artwork. So again, good stuff. As for the Night Spider story, it's short, sweet, and to the point. Basically, it's just there to just kind of show the origin story for Felicia Hardy as Night Spider. And I do kind of like how it goes. Like, in the sense, of course, Felicia Hardy is an established character in the Marvel Universe. Meeting her alternate universe self is not really that much of a big deal, because like her main universe counterpart, Night Spider is a cat burglar, and even before she got her spider powers, she still was very much a professional. And as such, I like how she essentially tries integrating her spider powers into her thieving. And again, there's not really much of a big conflict in that regard, as while she's doing her whole thieving work, she doesn't really encounter any challenges. I feel like that if we wanted to have a conflict there, it could have been that maybe the police start seeing a pattern in Night Spider's activities and start preparing countermeasures to her spider powers, which she gives her a struggle, which she struggles with, and she finds that she enjoys this and decides to keep going. But ultimately, if I can give one flaw to her story, it feels like it's a build up to something and then just drops it. As basically, like Felicia said, the whole Night Spider life is just too easy. She goes in, steals shit, and then just gets out without nary a problem. And she just kind of starts finding it dull. And again, to be fair, that doesn't mean the story itself is boring as a result. As the story, I do like how it just little by little continues showcasing Felicia as she properly utilizes her powers to be an expert thief. It's actually done rather well. It's done really well, and I do like how they showcase her getting used to her newfound spider powers. It's just that when it comes down to it, the story feels like it stops before we can actually get to a major conflict. Feels like the conflict that we should be seeing here is Felicia versus the police, but ultimately things kind of stop before the conflict can come to a head. As before we can even get to that point, Felicia just throws in the towel and says, "I'm done. I'm done. Turn myself in. You can have all this stuff. I'm bored now." And then she's pulled away to take part in End of the Spider-Verse. So, as a result, it is an interesting beginning, and I like how they establish Felicia in this world and how she starts building up the Night Spider persona. It's just that it feels like that the story stops before we can really get into the major meat of the conflict. So ultimately, an alright story, just needed more to it. So there we go. And that's for the Sakura Spider story. This one is very much just a short, sweet, and to-the-point origin story. After all, like I said, Sakura Spider was already a pre-established Spidey prior to this miniseries. So, and basically, while she was her world's resident spider person, or more specifically Japan's resident spider person, as it was established in Deadpool Samurai that there was actually a Spider-Man in her universe. It's just he operated in America and Haruka operates in Japan. Ultimately, the big thing with her is that, again, we just kind of get an origin story. And it hits a lot of the same beats that most other Spider-Man origin stories do. Like, parental figure dies, Spider person blames themselves, but they use the sacrifice to ensure that nothing like this happens again. Live with great power comes great responsibility, and thus go on to start flipping bad guys. So it's nothing really haven't seen before, but it is, I think, still done rather well. I do like how they showcase it in the story. It's nothing too advanced, nothing too amazing, but I think overall it does hit all the essential points for what you need from a Spider-Man story, and quite frankly, I think Sakura Spider is just really cool. I do at least like how, when it comes down to it, she's one of the more serious, grounded Spider people, despite the fact that she's a high school teenager. As like I said in the Deadpool Samurai manga, she's basically the straight man to Deadpool's antics. So I do kind of like that. While she is a Spider person, she doesn't quip as much, and ultimately just kind of realizes that, and does kind of go with the whole take the job a lot more seriously. Doesn't mean that she probably doesn't quip, but overall, it's just a nice little short, sweet, and to the point origin story, and I think that's really all you need with her. So yeah, that's all I have to say. Spider-Man India story, nice little character introspection. That's also kind of done what that does well with that. Is able to exemplify a lot of great artwork. The Night Spider story, a good start to her character, but kind of falls flat when you should have gotten to the zenith of the conflict. And the Sakura Spider story, just a short, sweet, and to the point origin story. So, on the whole, once again, good stuff. So, yeah, I think that's really all I have to say. Thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson. I hope to see you on Tuesday as we look at issue 4 of this miniseries. So, till then, I hope you have a good Saturday, and take care.